President Kennedy's visit to Dallas, Texas, November 22nd, 1963. I was there.
This nation is founded by men assassinations and lockdowns. And the rights of every man are diminished. The rights of one man are threatened.
My name is Joseph H. Carter. I worked as a writer for United Press International. This is my truth. My very joy as a journalist was going out and digging up positive, beautiful stories that would fill the newspaper and make people feel good. We called them features, and I enjoyed that very much. I enjoyed sitting there and making sure that what we sent out about the day-to-day happenings that we call news, that it was written best possibly, understandably, correct spelling, correct in all ways, punctuation, and most of all, it was truthful. The truth had been sought out on hard news. And I suddenly became a very serious-minded reporter. I mean, I was 31 years old. I was no infant, but I'm telling you, that was a very maturing afternoon. I was the backup man for the main White House correspondent, who was named Merriman Smith. When the plane landed, the Kennedys got off the plane, and I followed the Kennedys there along the fence after they got off the plane. And there was a drove of people there, and I was right maybe 10 yards from them, and watching Mrs. Kennedy, who was very beautiful and very lovely attired, as they walked along the fence shaking hands. Nothing untoward happened. And of course, I was there to try to figure out what happened. In the event some weird person decided to do something out of the normal. You know, there was hateful information, lies being told about JFK on leading up to his visit. And he was running for re-election, and the polls did not show him running very well. He needed to start the campaign early if he was going to get re-elected to a second term. Kennedy then got in the open-top limousine, and I boarded the White House press bus wearing a badge that said I was a correspondent. And we started the drive from Dallas Love Field down toward the Trade Mart. The bus, there must have been 40 people on the bus. It was an old Greyhound type bus that had this. In fact, here's a photograph of the very bus that I was on. The crowd was friendly. It was amazing that the general public was out. They were in the high-rise building. As we drove down Main Street, you could just see them, you know, leaning out the windows, waving and cheering, and it was a beautiful thing. It had been raining that morning, and they had a plastic cap that they put on the limousine in the event of the need, whether it was weather or security. Kennedy said, "Take it off." It was his own order that he'd be in the open air, which made the shots more certain. The White House press bus came down Main Street to Elm Street and made a hard right turn and went down and was turning to make a very hard left turn onto Stemmons Freeway. My bus was right down here. Lee Harvey Oswald was on the 6th floor, right up here. So I was directly under him, those 6.2 seconds when he went bang, bang, bang. They were packed as fast as you could pull them off. You know, it was an easy shot. He was wedged in his little personally constructed sniper box, and the rifle was wedged right, held steady against the window. He had a telescopic lens, and he had a rifle that was powerful enough to do what he did. Why he did it, we'll never know. If you're an infantryman, and you're shooting a single shot rifle, you want to squeeze them off as fast as you can. But he had a bolt action and lamp, so it was bang, 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 like that. And he no doubt saw the brains of John Kennedy being thrown away, blown away. One of the shots blew out Kennedy's car was down there maybe 3 times the distance that I was from the rifle. And then one shot got Governor John Connally, and the other shots there were multiple wounds, but the fatal one was in the head. It blew off his head, blew brains and blood on Jackie Kennedy. I heard the shots. I was an Army veteran, and I had a same infantryman's score as a marksman that Lee Harvey Oswald had. And I can tell you that those were 3 shots from the same weapon. There were not the third shot, or they were all 3 identical, and they were etched in my brain, and they rather drove me nuts for many years, thinking that there I was, 31-year-old guy, tender in a sense, but I had been a police reporter, and I'd been around a lot of crimes. It wasn't like I did not burst into tears when I found out John Kennedy was dead. Most of these guys on the bus were 20 years older than I, and except this one guy that's still alive. He was a young guy too. But it takes a long time to become the White House correspondent for a major newspaper. So I jumped up out of the bus, ran up to jump off, but there was an agent there or somebody blocked me. He said, nobody gets off the bus. And so I wanted to get off at the scene of the crime. I thought something had happened down there. I saw a policeman running up this little grassy knoll, and I thought, something happened down there. There's a news story, and I can get down there and get it first, and hopefully get it right. Well, they would not let me off. The bus went on to the trademark where Kennedy was to speak. I need to note, between the bus and me were a line of cars, including one that carried Merriman Smith, the UPI White House correspondent, and I was there as his assistant, his backup reporter. And when I got to the trademark, he stayed in this, what we call the pool car in those days. He stayed in it and went into Parkland Hospital right behind the White House limousine, went over and saw Kennedy dead in the back seat of that limo, that open top limo. By that time, Lee Harvey Oswald was on his way down those 6 floors and was heading out of the Texas School Book Depository. Who would have ever thought to go look at who's running out of the door of the Texas School Book Depository? And of course, the sad thing, there was no witness. He was the only guy that worked routinely on the 6th floor. There were 2 wire services, major wire services on that bus, the Associated Press and United Press International, 1 correspondent each. I ran into the trademark and found a telephone, and with a dime that I had, I plugged it. I called my bureau and I said I heard 3 shots, and I saw a cop run up a green grassy knoll on our way down here. I was talking to another writer and the editor for the whole division, Jack Fallon. He said, "Joe, John Kennedy has been shot. They've taken him to Parkland Hospital. Get over there as quickly as you can." I hung up the phone, ran out, and the other cars that were in the caravan had blocked in the bus. I looked out toward the driveway, and there sat a limousine with 1 passenger in it, and I ran over and I said, "The president's been shot, and he's been taken to the hospital. I can take you there if I can ride along." So I leaped in that. He said, "Get in." I got in the limousine, and we sped on. I did not know where Parkland Hospital was. I was playing a game, but there were a lot of cop cars and other vehicles hurrying toward the hospital, and we quickly were there. I raced upstairs into what they had set up as a press room at Parkland, and I found another pay telephone, and I placed a dime in it, opened it up, told him I'm at Parkland Hospital. I'm overlooking the emergency room parking lot, and that the president's car is down there. I can see it through the window. And he said, "Joe, we got to keep that phone open." And he dispatched a first-year graduate from University of Texas named Bill Hampton, who came out, drove his own car out, parked it, ran up, and he kept that phone open. And I went back down the hallway to that press room, and I there waited to see what happened. As I walked around that room, and by the way, the press bus had freed itself, and the other correspondents by then were in the press room. I looked out the window, and I watched the car, the limousine, and in that time, I saw the door open in the emergency room, and out came a bronze casket bearing the body of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, taking it to a hearse. Behind it walked Jackie Kennedy. Her beautiful dress was covered with blood and brains. It was a horrible thing to see. But she was no more than 25 feet from me down, but I was 2 stories up looking down on her. She got into the hearse, and it went on left. I did not know where it was going. I did not have any inside information. But then suddenly in walked the acting press secretary, a guy named Malcolm Kilduff was his formal name. But Mac, who later became a very good friend of mine, walked up to a little podium that had been set and announced that the president was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. I raced down the hall, grabbed the phone from Bill Hampton, and told Jack Fallon, who put it on the international wires of United Press International, and the news went around the world. As we sat and waited for 10 minutes maybe, then Mac came in and said, "Get on the press bus as fast as you can. We're leaving." We went back to Love Field, and at that time, one of the correspondents in our little group that was on the White House press bus got off and went up on to Air Force One, and he witnessed the inauguration of Lyndon B. Johnson. After that happened, he came back down off off of Air Force One and came over and briefed us all on what he saw. With that information, then he and the entire press corps that was traveling day in and day out went over and got in a chaser plane that would follow Air Force One back to Andrews Air Force Base in Washington. I raced into the terminal at Love Field, and I had started that day. I had had my breakfast, and I had 2 quarters, but it took a dime for a payphone, so I thought 5 dimes would be enough to last me all day. Well, it wasn't. I got in them wanting to call and tell them that we had a new president of the United States. The whole world didn't know where LBJ was. I mean, they didn't know if he had been shot. They didn't know, ignorance was a mock. There was a very handsome black woman, well-dressed, standing there with a phone in her hand with a dime, about ready to make a call. I said, wait, I need to use that phone. And I mean, the world, who knew but what they were preparing to launch ballistic missiles with nuclear bombs. I knew the word had to get out. And she handed it to me very nicely. Then I reached in my pocket for a dime, and I had no dime. And I said, ma'am, I need your dime. And she gave me a dime, and I placed it, and I recanted the story that I had been told there on the tarmac. And the story then went out. Judge Sheriff Hughes had administered the oath of office, and that we now had a president. It was a soaring nightmare that my friend Bill Hampton later told him after he handed me the phone, he went back to get in his car, and he said I started crying and couldn't stop. I never cried. He was a young guy. I was 31. I would guess that he was about 21. And he was a very nice young man, just first day on the job almost. And here he had faced this enormous thing, and he heard what I told Jack Fallon there that day. She knew what had transpired. I frankly have not talked to Bill in years, and the last I heard, he was one of the children's books editor at the New York Times. I wish him well. I continued there in Dallas, editing and going out and doing my own reporting from time to time. But during the time at 10 p.m. at night until 6 a.m. in the morning, I was in charge of what transmitted from Dallas, Texas to New York, where it was placed on the international wires. And that, I'm talking about something that happens in a millisecond. Somebody is sitting there and they throw the switch and it goes on the international wires. But it was my job to read, to edit, to verify facts, or make the reporter who wrote the story verify them. And I got to tell you, I tried to be a tough reporter and a tough editor, and I dug for the news. And I did not have any foregone conclusions. I was just reading the evidence. It became stronger and stronger to me as things went on. During that period of time, those hours, those days and weeks, that Lee Harvey Oswald had indeed been the man up in that little sniper's nest on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, who squeezed off those 3 shots in 6.2 seconds, and I heard them just as well as he did. Moments later, he fled that building and grabbed a cab and went out to the suburbs and was walking along the street. And he went to his apartment, his room rather, in a rooming house, and he picked up a pistol. And then he went down and was walking the streets in the suburb, and this officer, patrolman, J.D. Tippit, saw him and saw that he was acting erratic and called for him, or something happened. And Lee Harvey Oswald went over and pulled the pistol and murdered the man right there. There happened to have been an eyewitness of that account. And when the police arrived to investigate Officer in Trouble, they were told that the suspect had run into a theater. A detective went into the theater, this is early afternoon, ran in where a picture was being played and saw a lone man sitting over, and he ran up behind him, and the guy had a pistol like this, ready to shoot him, and he jammed his hand down and it stopped it. They arrested Lee Harvey Oswald there, took him back to the police station, and did identify him as Lee Harvey Oswald. With the eyewitness of the murder of J.D. Tippit, they had a pretty strong case immediately, a very good case for a first-degree murder. Linking him back to the sniper's nest was a little more complex. However, they got up there, they found a rifle. He had abandoned it. There were 3 spent shells. He had built boxes of school books around to make the sniper's nest, opened the window there on the 6th floor, and fired the 3 shots, very methodical. As a trained infantryman myself, I many times have sat there and gone, and myself, it works, 6.3 seconds, 3 shots. With that evidence, it was pretty quickly came to my mind as an editor that we had this was the alleged assassin, and he was innocent until proven guilty. He was being transferred from one jail to another the following Sunday, and my friend Terry McGarry of UPI was there to witness this transfer, and Jack Ruby stepped out of the crowd and fired a single shot in the gut of Lee Harvey Oswald. That was the 3rd murder of the day, and of the period, not the day. And then, with those shots fired, they rushed him to the same emergency room where John Kennedy had died. And there he was pronounced dead. What had happened that was a 4th and the insidious crime is that Lee Harvey Oswald never had a chance for a trial by jury, which is part of the jurisprudence of the United States and of all civilization. It goes clear back to the Magna Carta that you are innocent until proven guilty. So you can't put a dead man on trial. So there was no trial. Jack Ruby later was tried and convicted, and during the appeal of his conviction for murdering Lee Harvey Oswald, died of cancer. And he's gone. Whether he was guilty or not is no question in my mind. And but at that point in history, with the moment Oswald was dead, that meant who is going to decide if this man's guilty or innocent? So it was up to the working press. And that weighed heavily on my shoulders and the other news guys that were covering the story. That included the Associated Press, a wonderful organization, the New York Times, the TASS, the Russian news agency, Reuters, the British wire service, other wire services, and other great newspapers all were in town. All 3 of the networks were there. and we were all doing our own independent investigations and research, seeking to see if we could find a co-conspirator. Then some guy would come up, well, what about this? And it'd be some concocted idea he had about what really happened. Well, it became very annoying to me. I was very sensitive about the job we did. When I would go in at 10 o'clock at night, to take over that desk, I would have watched the afternoon news. I would have read, they would have had newspapers there with their reports, magazines and books that were there that were just fresh coverage of this thing, and I kept abreast of it all. And I had to many times refute out just crazy concoction. If you hear something that doesn't sound like the truth, there's a good chance it's not. There's more truth out there, but the lies are always nagging at the truth.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade. The first reports say that President Kennedy has been seriously wounded by this shooting.
Well, I'd like for them to think that I stood on the side of truth and of generally liberal thinking that human beings are all the same, regardless of race, religion, creed, education, or economic status. Luckily, especially in America, the opportunities are so wide open.